Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Death Cafe. We're so delighted to have you here and really want to thank you for spending your time here with us, having a conversation around something we're all going to experience in this life, and that's death and all that that brings to our life. As people start to come in, I want to welcome you. I want to invite you to get yourself a cuppa of something and a treat for yourself, and we'll get ready to start the cafe. As you come into the cafe, let us know where you're from. One of the most wonderful things about a Death Cafe Live is people from all over the world drop in, and it just makes the world a little bit smaller. So I'm very excited as you drop in. Let us know where you're from, and I look forward to our time together. The Death Cafe really is for you. It's not about me up here just sharing the conversation, talking about topics, which I'm happy to do, but it's about what's on your mind. So as soon as you come on and there's something on your mind, go ahead and pop it in the chat and I will get to question it. Hi, Sue. Welcome from New York. Glad to have you here with us. And in just a minute or so, we'll get started. And if you have any questions or comments, please put them in the chat and we'll get the conversation going. And I really want to know, thanks for the heart, Sue, what's on your mind. That brings me the greatest joy just to be present for all of you. As you're starting to come on, get yourself a cuppa. And why don't we take just a moment to ground in some breath and come present, no matter what has been going on in your day. Just taking a moment to breathe in and ground will give us an opportunity to be present, to hear our heart and listen to what might be moving through our mind. So if it feels right to you, close your eyes and take a couple nice deep breaths in. Allow yourself to connect to your breath, the feelings and the sensations of your breath in your heart and in your body. It's really helpful to connect in your body with your breath, all the way down from your toes, slowly moving up and noticing any areas of holding, control, or tension. And allow your exhalation to release that tension that you might be feeling. Dropping in deeper than before. Moving towards that still soft, quiet place where that deep sense of knowing exists, where that deep calm beneath the ocean floor flows. May I invite you to take a moment to let go of anything that's moving through you, to allow you to be present. Knowing that there's no place to go, there's nothing to do, but just be here together. After all, this is all we have is this moment. May you feel safe. May your mind, body, and spirit be connected with divine grace. May you feel loved, and may you know you are loved. With love from my heart to yours. Thank you again. It's lovely to have you here. Lena, it's great to have you here from Pomona. Thank you. And I'm excited to have you all here. So if you're new to Death Cafe, I just want to spend a moment sharing what the Death Cafe is. It's The Death Cafe itself identifies both the movement and the individual gathering, like we're having this evening. The moment began in Switzerland when Bernard Krietz held his first Café Mortel in 2014. Later, British web designer John Underwood was inspired to host a death cafe in his home in London in September of 2011. Today, we have close to 13,000 death cafes in over 80 countries, and we're just one of that many cafes. I love it. The Death Cafe events are always offered on a nonprofit basis, and it's important to make it accessible, respectful, and a confidential place with no intention of leading people in any conclusion, any product, any course of action. And if we were meeting in person, which I hope to do again, we'd be offering you refreshments. I always offer chocolate because, after all, death by chocolate, that's not so bad. So get yourself something sweet if you could. I want to let you know the overall objective of the Death Cafe gathering is to increase the awareness of death with a view of helping people make the most of their finite life. And when we accept the finiteness of this life, it allows us to live more fully, discarding the external roles and concerns that are essentially don't bring meaning to our life, thus allowing the space and incentive to focus on what is truly important and truly meaningful. People choose to take part of the Death Cafe gathering for many different reasons, but it's worth noting that the cafe movement has arisen spontaneously, appearing to meet a felt need and demonstrating that at least some people are willing to talk in our society and elsewhere about death openly and subjects related to death. A loving reminder, they're really not grief groups, lectures, or educational sessions, or avenues to promote any business or cause. Communication of end-of-life issues is the key to understanding and making irrational decisions in life. We can't magically make death disappear from our lives, nor can we completely erase the sadness and other forms of distress associated with death and related issues. However, we can talk about it. We can share insights and attitudes. We can learn from each other and strive together to cope more effectively with death, dying, and bereavement. And I think that's one of the magic of the Death Cafe. I've had the honor of facilitating Death Cafes since 2011, almost 10 years. And not one has been the same, even if we're brushing on the same topic. There's so much to explore as we evolve and learn and find ourselves in different times of life, just like this past year and a half with COVID, that really has put death in a different perspective. So I'm looking forward to sharing with you this evening. And I think we already have a couple of comments up. So let me see what's in the stream. And again, if you're signing on for the first time, welcome. If you're signing on for the first time tonight, welcome. And please ask your questions or comments in the chat. This is really an opportunity for you to share. So Lena, hearing you speak makes me want to learn more on how to propose a best I can dealing with death as well as life. So I'll try and prepare for death. Thank you. I got that correction. So your question is, Lena, correct me if I'm wrong, you want to know how best to prepare for death. And that's an awesome question. I wrote an article on this a couple years ago, and I have to giggle because my first comment was in the article was how can we prepare for death? And my first statement was, we can't prepare for death. And then that would have been the end of the article. But there are many things that we can do to prepare for death. And There's some things that are beyond preparation. But what we can do is we can prepare, we can touch death, we can process our questions and understandings about death to make us feel more comfortable as we approach death. So, the first thing that you can do, Lena, is exactly what you're doing now, and that's attending a death cafe, listening to other people, asking your questions, um, getting in touch with your fears or things that get in the way of death. There's many ways to prepare for death. We can kind of break it down in several ways. I might talk about tonight kind of the physical aspect of death, the emotional aspect of death, the spiritual aspect of death, and I might put in the practical aspects of death. Let's talk about the practical for a moment, if I might. There are many ways to prepare for the practical aspect of death, and that is number one, preparing your material life for the end of life. Meaning, what do you want to do with the things that belong to you that you can't take with you? Have you created a living will? Have you created an ethical will? And we'll share what an ethical will is in a moment. Have you told your loved ones what you want to do with your belongings? Do you want to share it with your family, with your children? Do you want to make donations? Are there special items like grandma's ring that you want a daughter or a niece or a loved one to have? Each step that we take, each moment of preparing, helps prepare us for our death. And it is an incredible, loving thing to do for our family. There's so much emotion tied up in our things. There's so much practical experiences tied up in the things that we have. And it's little pieces of you that were special that you leave with your loved ones. And that's a legacy. The other aspect of practicality is setting up that living will and starting to work with your legacy. A living will is the document, it's a legal document. It could also be called the advance directives, where you shared with your loved ones how you want to die, what's important to you in death as far as comfort for your physical, your space, your medical decisions, whether you want medications or not, help where you want to die. Those are all a few aspects of that part of our preparing for dying that's very helpful for our family members. And to find that advocate, that person or persons that you trust to follow your wishes. And I want to add, they may not be family members. It may be too difficult for a family member. You want to find someone that you completely trust to advocate for yourself, as well as follow your wishes, even under difficult circumstances. I'm thinking of those unexpected times where you may lose the ability to communicate your wishes. And if they were written down as well as shared with that person that's going to care for you, they'll have the confidence to articulate your wishes. I often tell the story of my sister who died a couple years ago of end-stage breast cancer, and she ended up with metastases to the brain, and she lost her cognitive functioning, and she wasn't able to make decisions for herself. The beautiful aspect is that her cognitive functioning left her in the state of bliss and almost very childlike, where she wasn't feeling a lot of pain, physically or emotionally. She wasn't scared. So I was very grateful for that. She did not have a living will. And I was her advance directive, her durable power of attorney. And that is the person that you assign legal rights to make decisions for yourself when you can't make those decisions. The only reason I had confidence in making decisions for her was, one, I had always been there for her those previous 10 years as she fought through cancer. I use that word fight because that was her words, I would say, as she lived with cancer. I was always with her during the medical decisions. I heard what her wishes were, but she didn't have them legally written. But I had the legal authority to make those decisions. So when it was time for a difficult decision after brain radiation put her in an incapacitated state of being, almost a vegetative state, I was able to work strongly with her oncologists to say, it's time to let go. As difficult as that was, I had the confidence that was the best decision for her. So this is an important aspect of preparing for dying, is getting your legal documents in place for your physical wishes, your emotional wishes, as well as your physical material life. As you prepare for that, as you go through the work and the processing of creating these documents, you start to prepare yourself for death. Start to realize that this life is not permanent. And you start to understand that at different levels of consciousness. And that actually frees you up for living. That is a very long conversation, what I just shared with you, but I hope those pieces are helpful. So besides that aspect, having these conversations with yourself and loved ones, going to things like Death Cafe, help us start to face our mortality. There's also a lot of beautiful education online. You can go to the Heartway website. There's articles, there's resources, there's education, there's retreats that also can help you brush upon facing our mortality. And as we do that, life gets sweeter. It really does. Lena, was that helpful? And do you want additional information tonight? I want to be helpful to you. Hi, Kathy. Welcome from Oceanside. Anything on your mind this evening? So, Sue, you wrote or experienced cancer. Is there something additional information that you want to talk about? And while you may be responding, and anybody else that's come on, please feel free to ask any questions or share any comments tonight. This is really for you. I mentioned an ethical will, and I'm not sure people understand what an ethical will is. We know what the legal will is, and that's the advanced directives. That's the living will, and those are legal documents that are bound. So when you sign a durable power of attorney to advocate for yourself and help you with end-of-life decisions and or medical decisions, so the durable power of attorney is evoked when you're in the hospital and you can't make decisions for yourself. An ethical will, simply stated, is a statement that transmits one's basic values, history, and legacy. It is typically directed towards a person's children or grandchildren or loved ones, but the message can have a much broader audience as well, such as your extended family and community. An ethical will or legacy letter is kind of a roadmap of your wishes to share your beliefs, your experiences, your life lessons, even your regrets with the family members who would outlive you. These letters can be by voice, by video recording, by journal entries. You can do one for each child, for each loved one. It really contains your stories, your philosophies, your wishes, your prayers. I have an example of that with a beautiful client of mine. His name was Mark, and if you go to the Heartway website, on the homepage is a video with him and me. And we worked for several months. He had ALS, and he lost the ability to utilize his hands and his muscles, a degenerative disease of the neuromuscular system in our body. So we spent several months writing letters to his children and doing video recordings for his 3 young children. And what he did in these legacies, besides professing his undying love, was he shared who he was and what philosophies in life were important. He was actually a coach for his children's soccer team. So he was a very philosophical man and a man that used these stories in coaching to teach about life. These letters and these videos will mark a place and a space for his children to always know him. And that's the aspect of legacy, leaving some pieces of yourself that people might not know or pieces that you want to share. It's absolutely a beautiful process for us to create as we tell our stories. As we tell our stories, we get to know ourselves deeper. As we tell our stories, we start to put a framing and a beautiful picture of who we are. And that often brings validation and or a call to action if there's things we're needing to change in our life. So it's a beautiful inspiration. So the legacy work is so important. End of life practitioners that will be training in October we'll get a module on how to help families create these legacy works. And you can do these legacy works right now. I have a client that I've suggested. She has 3 young children, and she comes up with these momisms that she wants to share, but her children may not necessarily be available for them. So I've encouraged her to keep 3 journals by her bed. And when she gets a momism flowing through, like wanting to share a piece about herself on how she loves or a wish she has for her children, she writes them down in this book. And this book will be a beautiful legacy for who she was and something that I absolutely know her children will value in the future. A legacy is kind of like a circle, a chain reaction that never ends of what you pass along to your family members and your community. The circle never has an ending. The circle of life, the circle of our existence. So that's what an ethical will is a little bit about. The lovely part of it is it's a creative process. And you can create an ongoing legacy because after all, we're evolving and changing and growing all the time. It's a beautiful thing to do. I do it for my daughter in a journal book that I've started from when she was a little baby. I just want her to know me and hoping that it will inspire her life to be all that she can be. Let me check in with what some of your questions or comments are. Thank you, Sue. Sue was commenting on the experience of cancer as an alternative to fighting cancer. You know, everybody has their different relationship with it, and experience cancer as well as fighting cancer both serve. And one thing that's so important is finding the road that works for you. Some people are fighters, and that fighting helps them get through. Some people need to embrace something versus fighting it, bring it in, understand it, and find ways of letting it go. There was a beautiful Dr. Bernie Siegel in the 1980s. He was a psychiatrist, and he worked with cancer patients and helping them to work through cancer. And he did a lot of visualization, and that's been very helpful in healing in cancer. And one of the things that he did was he created the visualization of Pac-Man. Do you remember the video game Pac-Man? Now it's so obsolete with all the incredible videography that we have. And he helped put his patients in a hypnotic state, and they started to visualize Pac-Man coming in and eating the bad cancer cells and taking these cancer cells out of their body. And so they were left with just good cells. And that was that version of fighting cancer. So you find the languaging that aligns with you. And all of that When we're aligned, we're in our best potential for healing, in our best potential. And we start to visualize our healing. Thank you. Let's see what else you've got to say. Sue's commenting, I know including immediate family are uncomfortable when I refer to my own death in any way. It doesn't bother me to talk about it because it's inevitable of life, but they say, oh, Sue, don't talk like that. I'd like to find ways to help them to face that. Thanks for sharing that, Sue. And yes, so many people are afraid of death. And there's really often a superstition of if we talk about death, that means it's going to make it happen. So it's a very difficult to bring that conversation. And I think the way we can help our loved ones is one, honoring where they're at and letting them know how much it supports you to talk about it, because we may not get that chance to talk about it. It's not guaranteed, right? We may die tomorrow. And then we missed an opportunity. Talking about death is also very, very intimate and often creates a vulnerability inside of us, a fear. We can't control death, as you know, and it's still the great mystery. So it's scary. For some of us, talking about it helps. For some of us, we want to avoid talking about it. So I'm a huge advocate of not forcing conversations, but I'm a huge advocate also of speaking our truth. So when we have someone that says, don't talk like that, I usually take that opportunity of, can you share more about why that's uncomfortable to you? And I'm not meaning to make you uncomfortable. It helps me greatly to have this conversation. And I want you to know who I am. In fact, death inspires life. So that might open up that conversation. Help them understand who you are and why you like to talk about it. That will help them immensely and give them another lens to look through on how to have the conversation around death. One of the things that we do is we deny it, some of us, and push it down. And in this denial or pushing it down, it doesn't go away. It actually grows. I have this theory that we have this pressure cooker in our gut. And every time we don't feel, we avoid, and we deny, all that goes into our pressure cooker. And you remember what used to happen to pressure cookers when they got too hot? Boom, they exploded. And that's the same thing that happens to us when we keep stuffing things in and down. Things sometimes seep out and sometimes they explode. So we're not really avoiding it, but it's out of sight and out of mind. But that also creates a whole bunch of dis-ease in our body, mind, and spirit. So when we get a chance to speak about our fears, and the denial, as you know, is closely linked to our fears. Some psychologists, including myself, think all fears are based on death as the underground. So when we talk about our fears, they don't own us as much. Yeah, it's so hard. It's so hard. But it also sets us free. It also sets us free. So those of us that are comfortable talking about death have this incredible opportunity to love people through. They get to see us and feel that we're not afraid of death. And I think that's the most incredible medicine. But I never want to tear someone's denial apart. I want to honor them and also show them an opportunity of how they can free themselves. I hope that's helpful, Sue. I've had many, many, many families say that. A lot of children say, I want to talk about death, and the parents don't want to talk about it. And it's really so important to be able to help each other. If the children don't understand what the parents' wishes are, they're not going to be able to be as fully present and or help. But I also want to note it's very, very scary for many. Very scary. Hope that's helpful, Sue. Kathy, I'm going to read what your sharing is. I lost a cousin in a horrific car accident last week. My goodness, my heart is with you. I'm struggling with the shock of his passing and can't seem to wrap my head around it. Any recommendations as far as a comforting book? I've been journaling all week and dabbling in daily self-care. I appreciate being here tonight, and I usually join this forum from a hospice volunteer perspective. Thank you. Thank you, Kathy. My heart is so with you, and I am thrilled you're dabbling in self-care and love. You comment about being in shock, and there's no way of not being in shock. I know as a hospice volunteer, you're familiar with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's stages and phases of loss and grief and dying. And even though she has stages and phases, I like to look at her theory in her stage theory, if you will, as really emotional experiences that we feel, sometimes all at once, sometimes over a span of time, sometimes in and out of the same feeling. But we do know when we have a sudden death, there is a definite experience of shock. And it's a very important one that is brilliantly created by a bioneurological system to support and protect us. There's no way when we're confronted with a sudden death to be able to process it all. There is a physical shock, an emotional shock, and a spiritual shock. And it takes time and tears for healing. Not just time and not just tears. It takes a while to process it. And the shock protects us because it's too much. Things are coming fast and furious. So the best thing that we can do for ourselves is give ourselves grace. Allow the emotions to come up and feel them. Journaling is so incredibly helpful. Self-love, like baths, healthful meals, time alone and with loved ones. All that is just critical. And having someone to process with. Time and tears will start to give you the opening to allow even emotions to flow. You may be in a place where you can't feel that much except for this achingness and or numbness that might be flowing through. The other thing that is so incredibly helpful at this time is rituals. Rituals transport us into the sacred. Rituals transport us beyond the noise or monkeys of the mind into our hearts, into our spirits. And that is the place and space where only death can be understood. We can't grasp it in that consciousness of our mind, but the spirit and the heart can, because it lives in a space of symbolism and energy. So it might be a beautiful time for a ritual for your cousin. And one ritual that I use all the time, if it's helpful for you, is I find a place or space that's sacred to me. When I'm in Northern California, I go to the river, and I have a few places that feel just right energetic. I take a journal book with me. I take a candle with me. I'm in a safe place. If not, I take one of those electric candles. I have the water of the river to bathe myself, wash my face. And I write a beautiful letter. I write a letter to this loved one, saying goodbye, sharing my heart, what my wishes are for their peaceful transition. anything that moves through me, and mostly to say goodbye and develop a way to stay connected. It's beautiful if somebody can be there to witness that with you, and oftentimes I do that alone. I weep like a baby during these rituals. There's just such a release, and in that release is a healing liquid, and is like a beautiful salve on my pain, and helps me connect with the sacred. So I offer that as an opportunity too in these times. At this moment, there's not per se a book that I would recommend, to be very honest. There are many books on grief out there. You can go to our website, www.theheartway.org, and there's many books on grief, but it's so new and so raw. I would encourage you to give yourself the time and space to be with this, and check in with some loved ones or someone that you trust for counsel. And Kathy, my arms are wrapped around you and heart is with you. And please don't hesitate to reach out, Kathy, if I can be of any support. Hi, Barbara. Welcome. It's always lovely to feel your shining spirit near. And thanks for the hangout comment with Andrea. I appreciate that and glad to have you with you. Kathy, I'm so glad that's comforting for you. You know, can I add one more thing about grief and ritual is that, you know, we're rushed in this culture to get over grief. I have to say, we never get over grief, and I don't think there's closure. Closure means an end, and death isn't necessarily an ending. It's an ending of a particular relationship, but we have so much opportunity to develop a new relationship. I'm not alone on this. I write a lot about and teach a lot about many cultures around the world and religions around the world that develop a new relationship with a person that has died. And that is founded on the fact that there is a strong belief that the soul carries on, the soul lives on, the spirit lives on. Even in Western religions, the soul moves on. And then there lies that opportunity of developing a new relationship with those who have died. Yeah, we really grieve the physical relationship, the touch, the voice, the sound, the smells of someone we love. But we also have an opportunity to connect with their spirit and their heart and the soul. And that letter writing is one way of doing that. Heart prayers or conversations. I've shared with that I have an ancestor altar in my room, and I have images and ashes and symbols that remind me of my loved ones. And I have a collective space for all my clients. And I talk to them. Yeah, I do. And that brings me comfort and gives me a connection. Sometimes they talk back. You wouldn't hear them, but I hear it in my heart. And it's so comforting. And I ask them for guidance often, especially when I'm struggling in life. So we have that opportunity of creating a new relationship. How do you do that? Or do you do that? Barbara, I think people are going to become more comfortable with death and dying. And since boomers are so used to having things their way, I'm a boomer, assisted suicide. That's not the current accepted term, I think, but will become more populated. Assisted suicide is perfect. Euthanasia is another way of doing that, and assisted death. And I think that is cracking wide open. I think you're spot on, Barbara. And there's so many conversations to have about that. And it's really interesting, the conversation. Of course, there's the legal conversation, there's the ethical conversation, there's the practical conversation, and then there's the aspect of death itself, of controlling death or fearing death, and how do you do that? And it's kind of interesting to me, speaking with many, many clients about that, teaching a little bit on that, writing about it for the training program. And I think underneath all that, what makes it so challenging is we have to come to a place within ourselves where, one, we're responsible for our mortality, and two, we're ready to accept it. And those two things, if you will, mean we have to overcome our denial and fear of death. And when we do that, we really experience life differently. You know, we don't have to rely on drugs to end our life. We have the ability at the end of life to simply stop eating and drinking. That's a very scary thing to do, though, because we have to say we're ready. So it's really that undercurrent is a conversation I don't often hear about what it truly means to have assisted death, what it truly means to allow our life to end, whether it's through taking a cocktail, whether it's through stop eating and drinking, or other means. The assisted suicide or the euthanasia has become a legal, ethical issue, and that's when it becomes very, very difficult. And there are many obstacles in the way. And I agree with you wholeheartedly, Barbara. That's a conversation that's going to keep happening and changing and evolving. And I'm thrilled to have the conversation around that. And we don't have to rely on that. We have that ability. And that has brought a lot of comfort to those that's important to already nearing the end of life. It's very interesting that I think it's 40 to 60%. Statistics sometimes just go out of my brain, but I usually remember the essence or meaning. It's a huge amount of people that get the end of life cocktail to allow themselves a peaceful death that actually don't take it. But it's that high, at least 40%. But it brings them comfort knowing that they have an option. And we do have that option, even without that cocktail. Not talked about so much. Interesting. What are your thoughts on that? Sue, thank you. Sue was sharing about how people that shed the physical garment are more present than people who are still embodied in the world of form. And it's very interesting because I often refer to when we die and leave our body, we put on a new pair of shoes or a new cloak of clothing. And what does that look like? Very funny. Very interesting. My talented, funny Bob took this path in January, Barbara says, and it was a beautiful, powerful ceremony with 6 of us in attendance. Lovely. Thank you for sharing that. And you know what? It is always reported when we take a powerful stance of ceremony and honoring that it is sacred. It becomes sacred because we move it into the sacred from the mundane. We make a conscious choice, and then everybody around us transcends into that sacred space. I'm glad that was a beautiful experience for you and your loved ones. And once again, Barbara, that helps to share that we can create these things. We got to have the conversation about it first, but we can create a sacred end of life. It just takes some time, some thought, some mindfulness, some heart-centered, and getting the support when you have questions, and there are those out there. Yeah. Thank you for sharing kind of the journey of Bob and the journey he was done. I love what you said, Barbara, and it brings another conversation is he was so done, no control over his body, and his wife was run ragged. He said enough was enough, and I respect that. I'm often asked, do we know when we're ready for death? And if we're listening, we do. We really do. Sometimes and often we get that message when we know. It's very hard to accept culturally because we believe life is the only path. So, someone that wants to end their life, there must be something wrong. They must be depressed. I've heard that so many times with clients from their medical team. No, it's not a form of depression. Some people are just ready for this life to end. And what brings to heart for me in our work at the Heartway is absolutely honoring that and helping people explore what life means to them. Death is part of life. It's an event in life. So it's really a deep, profound process to take a look at what brings meaning to our life. And there's a point sometimes when there is no more meaning in life. I have a beautiful client right now who has some cognitive issues, and her sister is the durable power of attorney. And she's working through a very difficult cancer. And it's a very painful up and down road. And there's been times when she said she's ready to end life, and her sister is 100% in support of that. And then the next minute she changes her mind. So it brings into the question about, how do you really know when someone's ready? We've been on this journey for several months with her, and she's had incredible moments of quality of life. And I told the sister that she will know, and you will know when she's ready. These other times have been about sharing her suffering and her pain, and the collective team wrapping around her to help her find her path. So sometimes it's not so clear cut when that moment is. It's a spiritual experience. It's an emotional experience. It's a full body experience when we know. When we listen with our heart and soul, I believe we'll know when we're personally ready, and we'll be able to hear when a loved one's ready. But I really want to share that it's not always black and white, as death is not. And that's what makes it so difficult, because our mind wants to know for sure. And sometimes we just don't know. And that's okay. And that's okay. Wow, these are powerful, powerful sharings. Thank you all. Lynn, welcome. Is there anything on your mind that you'd like to bring into the conversation tonight? And where are you checking in? Sue, that's an interesting comment about you were born C-section and you're wondering if assisted death might be seen in the same way. I have never thought of that. Thank you for sharing. It's really interesting. I don't have a comment on it except for to explore that a C-section, you're bringing a life into the world with a little bit more ease for the mom. And assisted death is another observation of that, of bringing death forward in a gentler way, if you will. So the conversation's so huge around assisted death, if you will, assisted suicide, euthanasia. The Right to Die Act, by the way, is not referred to as assisted suicide because that wouldn't have met the ethical realms. It's sometimes called that, but the legal is, if you will, gets involved. But, C-section and assisting someone in the end of life is very interesting. So there's a few points I want to bring in that may be helpful for your contemplation besides the drug itself and easing people into end of life, just like we do for our four-legged loves, euthanasia sometimes, is that there is a belief that suffering also is a path to our salvation. I don't mean to just put that in the Christian myth, if you will, is that our suffering in life sometimes moves us along in our spiritual path. Suffering often brings transcendence and awareness and healing in another way. So, not that we should not utilize means, it's an important conversation. I had a client that I was supporting through the Tibetan Book of the Dead rituals. That was very important to her, not being a Rinpoche, but we worked through the rituals and the meaning and process for months and months before her death. And when it was time to go on hospice, the social worker was kind of pushing the drugs. And this particular woman was taking Ayurvedic herbs. I was cooking for her Ayurvedically. She didn't want to take any pharmaceuticals. And the social worker kept pushing that. And I said, with the utmost respect, it's not mattering what your wishes are or mine. We're here to support Barbara and love her through. And this is what she wants to utilize at this time of her life. This is the way she wants to die, and we're going to love her through. And then the social worker kept saying, well, she shouldn't suffer. We're all about not suffering. And I said to her then, I'm wondering if you ever thought someone would choose suffering to their path of salvation and healing. And Barbara did do that. She spent months in working through her forgiveness and healing and honoring her human experience as a mother, as a wife, as a grandmother, forgiving herself and others, getting herself ready and moving through her fear of death. And that took a lot of suffering. And then there's a point where we're done, as some of you have said, where we can't suffer anymore. For me, the most important is stepping out of judgment of whether someone should or shouldn't, honoring where they are. We can never walk in someone else's shoes, but we can love them through. And by the way, as we love them through, we have our opportunity for healing and transcendence. The psychologist is saying, I never know that point of healing. I never know that aha moment. I'm so grateful when I can witness it. And I pray for it and support it in any way. But the human spirit is incredible. It's very incredible. So I'm just wanting to open up the perspective and also support the challenges in it and understanding them and knowing that, yes, we are moving along with it and we can help our loved ones. We can help our states embrace easier paths. I see, Barbara, you're commenting on all the hoops in California. It's very, very difficult right now. The law in California is up for review within the next 5 years. And the pieces that I saw in legislation will make it a little easier. For example, not a 15-day wait to get that second opinion. So it is twisted in a whole bunch of laws about mental competency. I'm having to write a letter for a client now that's been challenged. She wasn't diagnosed with dementia or Alzheimer's, but the family members fighting this process. So it's a slippery, slippery slope. It will change. And I pray and will work towards that with every ounce of my being in helping it be easier, gentler for those people that want to choose support at the end of life. And in the meantime, do everything we can till the laws change to make it easier and gentler to have the choices that they wish at the end of life. That is my gut-wrenching hope and wish, and what I dedicate my life to, is supporting those at the end of life and their families. Death isn't a tragedy. It's part of life. And to support people in embracing it as part of life is, I think, a real gift that we all can do. And you're all part of that, so thank you. I see we have 5 more minutes. Let me see if I can grab something else. And if there's anything else you're dying to say before we close tonight, please share it with us now. Thank you, Zane, that reminding us that suffering has a place and value, and it absolutely does. I'm wishing for someone to have those options when they wish, and embrace suffering as part of this journey of life. I don't think any of us escape, and have that opportunity to look inside of that suffering and how it is serving us. Reminds me of the good, bad, who's to say story that I don't have time to share. Let me see if I can catch something else. Good question, Sue. You're wondering if a lifelong struggle with power and control makes one's choice of when and how to die an issue. No doubt. If we've always been a person that's been in control, and I've had these clients, they're going to want to control death. Is that a bad thing? I don't think so. We can have more conversations around it, though, because the root of that is fear of being out of control. And dying is the ultimate out of control. And it's terrorizing for some. You can help them with that. I'm going to read one more here. What if the tremendous suffering and tests associated with the process of dying are an important experience for the development of the soul? Do we really want to short circuit that? I believe suffering is a development of the soul. Do we want to short circuit that? I don't think I can judge that, because some may not be available or get ready for that type of suffering. And they might not have the support to hold them through that. It's very, very frightening. But asking the questions, I love the questions versus the answer, helps us start to ask those questions. Help us look at suffering from a different lens. See how suffering embraces us. And it's absolutely an individual choice on how we can process our suffering or face our suffering. But we're not encouraged culturally to do that. So we can start loving people through. We can start doing that. And I certainly know all of you are on that path too. And I wish you the path of suffering to enlighten your life as well. Yeah. All these questions support our decision-making process. All these questions and contemplations are difficult. All these questions and contemplations take us to where we began this evening. They help prepare us, not just for death, but for life, because we have these contemplations every day. Every day. So for you, my friends, I wish you a full life. I wish you so many blessings in your life. I wish you to be present to every moment in your life, as it is an incredible gift. So we don't know what the next moment brings us. Please know you will be in my heart. Thank you for spending time with us tonight, and let us know how we can support you and love you. I wish you so much love, so much peace and bliss. From my heart to yours, we'll see you next month. Check in if there's anything that we can do to love and support you. Be safe, be loved, be you.